the word that kept coming up as like the primary emotion of this labor for me was agitated. I just felt so agitated. Whereas I felt like I was so uber zen last time. I was just like, oh, I got this. Like it was a super different energy. Holy Wild Birth is a podcast embracing the reclamation of giving birth, rooted in God's original design, undisturbed.
Here, we share home birth stories highlighting God's presence as the great midwife, as well as conversations about all aspects of a holistic, spirit-led childbearing year. From the perspectives of myself, traditional midwife Lauren Hall of Rooted in Eden Private Contract Association,
and me, holistic doula and birthkeeper Brooke Collier of Sister Birth.
To choose a holy wild birth journey is to consecrate all your decisions unto the Lord.
And to reclaim creation unadulterated by centuries of human attempts to control and improve upon what God has already called good.
Please remember, birth is not a medical event, but a natural process. We are not your care providers, and this should not be taken as medical advice. Welcome to the Holy Wild Birth episode, where today you are getting the absolute treasure of hearing Brooke's most recent birth story. I am sure that you are all as excited to hear it as I was for the first time. So I would encourage you to get a wonderful, nourishing beverage and settle in to hear her journey that she absolutely expresses both the flow and the agitation that happened within the birth story. I think that it absolutely embodies so much of her pregnancy journey, as does many birth stories. So I'm sure that you will be enlightened and just oozing with love for Brooke and baby Gilbert. Hello, my sweet friend.
Hello.
Okay, so today we get to hear your very fresh birth story, and I'm super excited to get to hear it. I've only read it, and so this is actually the first time I've heard you like share it, just kind of off the cuff, being, in your story. And I'm very excited to hear, and I'm very excited to share it with our listeners. And I am sure that everyone has been waiting for this episode. So I guess, where do you want to start?
It is always hard to know where to start a birth story because sometimes there's so much context leading up to it. I don't want to get lost in those weeds, but maybe I'll just share a few things about like the end, like the tail end of the pregnancy and the waiting, which those who follow me on Instagram have probably seen. I've been kind of journaling on Instagram during the end of my pregnancy and the beginning of this postpartum. But just to summarize, it was, I don't know, psychologically challenging. And then you came here to be with us for a week, which was amazing. And such a like delightful surprise that I didn't see coming. And you and I were just like, well, like you're going to be here. I might have already had a baby because you came when I was 40 weeks and 2 days. So we knew there's a chance I would have already given birth, or I could give birth while you were here, or I could hold the baby until after you left, which was my last choice, but the one I got.
You got.
Yeah. So it ended up, I was uncomfortable and having like contraction-like sensations like on and off pretty much the entire time you were here, but like nothing that ever picked up steam, nothing that ever even felt at all classic. I was like, is this even a contraction? It's just like uncomfortable sensations. And I kept waiting to get emotional enough to have a baby because my track record is that I get emotional before I have a baby. So it seemed like, well, that needs to happen, but you can't force that to happen. So yeah, I mean, just ended up having a week with you where I feel like the Lord really used that time while you were here
Yeah.
to just do some deeper prep work in my spirit and in my
Yeah.
family. Really,
Such a precious.
yeah, it really was a precious week. Like, I'm never going to forget, like, sitting in my yard with you and Heather and just praying and sharing and ministering and then
Dancing.
yes, dancing and so precious. And then like some of the stuff that you helped us kind of figure out with my daughter, which I'm not going to get into that. It's a whole other topic, but I felt like some significant freedom being bought there. And just knowing, having you around to feel safe to decompress different things that I was feeling worried about or anxious about, or it was just so meaningful. But I think it was like partway through your visit, you had one day that you had planned while you were here to go somewhere else for the day with some other friends for the whole day. And of course, it was that day that I woke up with bloody show. And
I was like this whole time, this is the day she's gonna.
I was like, this is very interesting, right? Like, yeah. And so I was like, this is my 6th baby. I'm probably gonna have a baby like really soon because bloody show is usually like an imminent sign of labor, especially for multips.
Yeah, for me especially, like even with my primate, like my first birth, as soon as, for me, and I know that's not for everybody, but as soon as I see bloody show in my body, I'm like, okay, baby's like here.
Right. Yeah. But I had no contractions or anything, you know, it was just like, but while you were gone that day, I was just like preparing things for the possibility that at any minute I could start labor and have a baby.
Yeah.
And almost, I think, expected that would happen before you got back that night or like shortly after you got back.
Right.
And it didn't. So then the middle of that night, which was also your last night with us, I had a ton of bloody show, like not to be TMI, but it was a lot, like very globby and mucusy and, you know, wonderful, like the sort of thing one would get excited about. And so then that morning, that was at 2:30 in the morning. Then I woke up, 7-ish and still wasn't having contractions. I felt really frustrated. And you came in and visited with me for a bit and we talked through some things and had some tea and did some homeopathy. Sounds like we're doing drugs. Did some homeopathy.
We did some homeopathy. I didn't. I didn't do any homeopathy.
I did it. You were the dealer. And did some repositioning stuff. The Three Sisters. Is that what we called it? Yeah.
Three Sisters.
Because we suspected it might be asynclitic just because of the very erratic contraction pattern. Like back to that episode we did on Can't Measure Mystery, how not every contraction has the agenda of getting a baby out, but sometimes getting a baby positioned to come out. And then you were like, do you want me to stay? And like kind of change our plans, because your plan was to leave that day around noon. And I had to dig deep and be like, I think my body knows something that my mind doesn't want to know, which is that this baby's going to come when you're gone.
Yeah.
Which is kind of like mildly disappointing on us. Because it wasn't, I had this story in my head of how cool it would be to have the baby while you were here. But then I was just like, I'm just noticing my own body and like the fact that it kept having signs and symptoms when you were not there or almost gone. And I clearly knew it wasn't because of who you are or like the quality of your presence, but in my own unique brain, it was like too complicated for me almost to have you waiting in the wings and my local midwife I had hired. And I just felt like for some reason, just kind of overwhelmed by it. And that sounds so silly, but it was just like, I needed to simplify the landscape kind of.
Yeah. Yeah. And that was what I was intuitively feeling as well. Was that like, that's the fun story. That's like what you kind of wanted. It was what you had ideally planned at the beginning, and before you were like looking at hiring a midwife, we had gone down that route, but then it was like, it felt like, okay, this is what I have decided on. This is the midwife that I hired. This is who's waiting to attend my birth. And it feels like almost like the kindest thing. Like, this is what I should just stick with what I planned. Yeah. Even though this sounds amazing and romantic and beautiful and all the things and lovely, like this is what I planned and I should kind of hold to it. Mm-hmm. And I don't know, it just felt like like, yeah, you just had, there was too many options and too many things, and you just needed to like stay the course, like I
Yeah,
just
that's
need
well said. Hmm. And it was
so
really great to be able to have that conversation with you openly without offense, just like, because on one level I was like telling you to, no, just go ahead and leave. Felt almost mean, but I just felt safe to be honest with you. And then it felt like you were on the same page ultimately. So then you and I just spent some time that morning. We went for a walk in the woods too. And it was
yeah, that was
nice
a
while your
wonderful.
family started packing up. And I remember gathering a few pieces of nature that caught my eye while we were out there. And then you were looking up kind of what they symbolized. And even noticing the symbolism of each of the plants I had intuitively chosen was meaningful. And I put those in a jar in my windowsill in my birth room. And then I was just kind of like waiting for you guys to be totally ready to leave and facilitating our children saying their goodbyes, which was
That was hard.
a little heartrending, actually.
Yeah. Honestly, I think about that, how much more difficult that would have been had you been postpartum and having to deal with the fallout of like sad children because their friends had left.
Yeah,
That would
there were
have
tears.
That would have been a lot of extra.
That's true. I hadn't even thought of that. Okay, so my baby's here, and you can probably hear him. He's kind of a noisy guy.
Like, I want to tell my story.
He's a noisy guy. He's already gained a pound at 10 days.
Good job.
Yeah. So once the decision was made that you guys would continue as planned and depart, it was interesting. I noticed in myself, I was like, I actually almost started crying at one point in the early afternoon. I was like, I need them to leave so I can have my baby. I knew that like probably once that was wrapped up, that something would shift.
Yeah.
And so you joked on your way, like right before you pulled out, you're like, watch, you'll probably have a baby when I'm 2 hours away.
Yep.
And I was like, yeah, right. Like that's a little ridiculous. But I did have a sense it would be that night.
Yeah.
So
well, I knew I was thinking like literally when I'm 2 hours away, knowing that we were going to be, it would take us a long time to get that far because we had to grocery shop and do dinner and had to stop to see Sherry. And I was like, I'm going to be about, which was going to be 6-7 hours later, in my mind. I was like,
she's gonna... okay. I didn't know that's what you meant. Yeah. That's interesting.
That's what my thought was like, it's going to be about, we're going to be about 2 hours away from her.
That's so funny.
She has this baby.
Well, spoiler, I didn't have my baby when she was 2 hours away, but I did have a water break when you were 2 hours away. And because I just got through the rest of the evening, like had dinner with the kids and kind of shepherded them through saying goodbye to their friends and took a nap. And then I was laying down with my 6-year-old at her bedtime. And when I got up from that, my water broke. So then I was like, okay, really, it's going to happen now, like any second. So I texted my midwife, and her name's Laura, and I said, my water broke. And I think she also thought that probably means it's coming fast because this woman's already had bloody show. She's a multip. Her labors are not short usually, or not long. But she was on another birth 45 minutes away. Go figure. So Lauren and I had a good chuckle about how ironic it was that once Lauren was gone and the local midwife I'd hired was 45 minutes away, that's when I was going to choose to have my baby.
You were just wanting it.
Either the midwives were available. But yeah, nothing really happened besides what had been happening. Like we're talking 30-second contractions every 15 to 20 minutes. So I just got in bed with an adult diaper on and laid low, snoozed. And at about 2-ish a.m., my midwife was finishing up at that other birth. And I'd had a few contractions that felt like they were getting stronger and a little closer. So she came straight here. And our birth photographer came too. About 2:30 a.m. they arrived. And I got out of bed. And Tim finished filling up the birth pool and lighting the candles in that room. And just kind of getting the playlist on. It was all very beautiful. And I sat on my birth ball in my robe and my pretty bralette. And I was just kind of like rolling my hips. And like Tim said later, it seemed like I was like a boxer in the corner, like getting ready to go into the ring. Like you should stand behind me and rub my shoulders and be like, all right, you got this. Because in my brain, doing this thing I know better than to do, but I was comparing it to my previous birth. And my previous birth had been, I was laying in bed with very manageable contractions for 2 hours. And the second I got out of bed, they stopped, which happened this time too. But then when I hit the water, they started in earnest and I had a baby 30 minutes later. So in my mind, I thought, I'm going to get in that water and the contractions are going to come back and this baby's coming out. Yeah. Okay, so I got in the water after I'd like geared myself up and nothing really happened. It was just very disappointing. I was just like, they're still kind of there, but like I'm bored. Like I was sitting in the water I'm like, this is really boring. And everyone's just sitting here looking at me. If I'm bored, I'm not in labor land. Like this is not, birth is not imminent. So they like left, like go away and come back in and check. And sometimes the midwife would just sit with me and chat about stuff. But finally, we all admitted to ourselves that it wasn't happening, and she suggested I get back in bed. So I did, and then her and her photographer went downstairs to rest. And then so I think it was about 4 that she sent me back to bed. And then around 6, she came back up to check in, and she's asked if anything had changed. And I was like, yeah, not really. I mean, it's still the same. Like, there are contractions, but they're far apart, and they're really easy. You should probably just go. So they left. And Tim was sleeping through all this, and I was like having just enough contractions to not sleep, Right. So I continued to lay there and have these lame contractions.
These lame contractions. I love you so much.
They were so lame. Until the sun started to rise. And then it was something in me like broke. And I was just like, I can't face another day of this limbo of like having these signs and symptoms, but nothing's really happening, but I'm too uncomfortable to have a normal day, but I'm not comfortable enough to like sleep. It was just like, it felt suddenly so overwhelming to me to face another day of like adult diaper wearing.
Right? The rising of the sun does something to laboring, that like pre-laboring woman, like another day thing. It does something.
Because you feel like, I felt like I'm not going to have my baby today because my children are going to wake up any second.
Right.
And how am I going to go into labor in that setting, So it felt like I'd lost my opportunity for another like 12 hours, basically. But so I woke Tim up and I started sobbing. It was the hardest cry I've had in a real long time. I cried my eyes out and was like on my hands and knees, like pounding the bed and snot running down my face and like all the things were wrong. And poor him, he just woken up. He said later that it was like somebody had died the way I was crying. I was so intense. And
sounds like the release you needed.
Such a release. And then at one point I finally was like, I just want my baby. And I think that was like that tipping point that I'd been waiting for emotionally. But then I pulled it together and I was like, okay, well, we have to get through this day. So Laura had said something before she left about how he's sitting on my pubic bone. So I'm going to figure out how to help him engage so that I can have some real contractions. And you can go make me some breakfast while I look into that. And I just started like trying to plot, like, how am I going to get through this day? And he's like, you can stay in bed. Like, I'll take care of the kids, whatever. So he goes down to make me breakfast. And while he's downstairs, I'm laying on my side, wrapped in my pregnancy body pillow, Googling how to get my baby to engage. And I took some pulsatilla and caulifilum. Is that what it's called? Thank you. So pulsatilla for helping me position a malpositioned baby, caulifilum for the contraction sorts that I was having seemed like might be a good fit based on our previous conversation. And Laura agreed. So, and then suddenly I had a really like different contraction. And then it was followed up very quickly by another one like that. And another that kept getting harder and closer together to the point that I felt pinned to the bed and like had to vocalize through them, like moaning. And I remember my brain was still like, but I have to get my baby to engage. Like, so I was like trying to contort my pelvis in different ways that I thought might make it easier for his head to tuck under the pubic bone. And I was like, and then at some point it clicked. I was like, I'm probably having these contractions because he is engaged.
Yeah.
Okay. I can stop worrying about that. So when Tim came up with my breakfast and found me like this, like writhing on the bed and moaning, he texted the midwife. It was like, we looked at his text history, 8:27 a.m., I think. So she had left around 6-ish. Text her 8:27 about my contractions, and she said, I'll come right back. And he said, whoa, wait, did Brooke tell you to come? And she's like, no. And he's like, well, then wait a minute.
Yay.
So I texted her 8:41 and said, contractions so intense, right on top of each other, can't stay on top of them. And she's like, I'm driving. So
I love that he protected that, like he kept her informed, but it was also like, wait, I have to make sure that this is what she wants. And
yeah,
I just
totally.
think that, especially knowing that he really wanted to not do it without a midwife there.
Yeah.
I think that's such a beautiful like picture of the unity that you guys really walked in.
That's a great point. Yeah. So at one point during these hard contractions while we were waiting for Laura to arrive, I yelled, I need more water! And he lunges for my water jug. And I'm like, not that water, that water! And I pointed at the birth pool and I was like, but it's cold now! Because it's been sitting for hours.
Right.
He's like, well, let me work on getting it warmed up. So he heads off to do that, and I just keep laying there moaning. And yeah. Then he's like, it's actually pretty warm. I think you could probably come and get in now. So I hobbled over there, and just as I was walking over there, Laura and our photographer came in again. Just good timing. And so basically I just went straight into the pool with the, like, it's funny. You're in real labor when you don't care what you're wearing anymore. I just had on like a thin white long sleeve t-shirt and an adult diaper. And I was just like, somebody was like, do you want to put on your pretty bra? And I was like, no, like, I don't even care anymore.
Right.
And got in, and I was like, this is not warm enough. So he's like, well, it felt warm to me. And I was like, it's not. You have to bail some of this out, get hot water in here. So he's like pulling electric kettles full of hot water in, and it still never really got warm enough.
No.
But whatever, I wasn't about to get out.
That's the bane of water bursts. Like,
yes. Yeah, they're a pain in the butt for sure.
Yeah.
And I know that full well as a birth attendant, but as a mother, you just want the water.
Yeah, I need the water. Absolutely. Like, benefits outweigh it for sure. Like, pros outweigh the cons there, but it's like when it's cold, it's just awful.
Yes. So at this point, I'm happy the sun's up and I could see out my big window by my birth pool, which is something I'd wanted. So I could see the pretty colors on the trees. And there's also, Tim had forgotten to put the liner in the pool. And it turned out there was a tiny hole in the bottom that made like a little bubbler fountain in the middle of like little air bubbles. So that was like my focal point while I was in labor in the pool. I was just looking at that bubbler.
I love that. Especially with all of the like water and flow and
yes, I forgot to mention all of that. Yeah, that's a little backstory there. But in the month or so leading up to this, Father had been giving a lot of word pictures and prophetic words and scripture all about flow and water and wells, and it's pretty interesting. I'm still not even sure I'm done unpacking all of that, but one of the take homes was like flowing sometimes requires, you and I were talking about this, like being flexible and yielding to the tumultuousness of the water, right? Like whether you're on like the rapids of a river or the Lake Michigan on a windy day, like flowing isn't always this peaceful, calm thing, but it can be like a like jarring kind of thing. And in order to get through it, you have to be willing and able to go with it and not resist it, because resisting it means you get thrown under.
Yeah.
So I feel like that was a good word going into this labor, because it definitely felt more like a tumultuous river or a windy day at the lake than a stream. Like it was the word that kept coming up is like the primary emotion of this labor for me was agitated. I just felt so agitated. Whereas I felt like I was so uber zen last time. I was just like, I got this. Like was a super different energy. And I'd had a lot of nervousness going into this birth, which was a first for me, but just nervousness about experiencing the intensity of labor sensations again. And I don't know if that was like a foreknowing that it was going to be more intense and painful, or if my nervousness created the intensity and the pain.
Right.
It could be a little bit of each.
Cycle of both. Yeah.
Yeah. But needless to say, once I got in the water, it did not get zen at that point. It stayed tumultuous, and I was trying all these different positions, and the contractions were no longer on top of each other. They weren't like that intense transition type contraction pattern. They spaced out, but they weren't exactly pushy right away either. I could feel descent, but it wasn't fetal ejection reflex by any stretch of the imagination for the first many contractions. But they just felt hard, and I felt it was very hard to get kind of grounded in my body and in my mind. Just kind of agitated and switching positions a lot, trying to find something that would feel productive and give relief, and couldn't seem to find it. It was like really restless. And then at some point they did transition to, let me paint the scene a little bit too. My 11-year-old, my 7-year-old, and my 6-year-old were all in the room watching very quietly, and my husband. And then the midwife was actually just outside the room, or close to the door to the room, like pretty far back, because we had had a lot of previous conversations about how I wanted this birth to be as untouched as possible. Like I wanted it to feel like a free birth. And she very graciously gave me that. She gave me that, like without questioning me, without doubting me, without pushing back. So she was very much like waiting in the wing. I don't even know if she had gloves on, like she was just letting me do my thing. And then when the fetal ejection reflex contractions started happening, I didn't push with them right away, but they just were hard. Like I was just like, this feels like this. It felt more like I was splitting my pelvis in half, and I had like shooting pains down my inner thighs. And so finally I think I got tired of that, and then I started pushing with them because I wanted that to be done, like I didn't want to breathe through them anymore. I wanted to work with it to make it end sooner.
Yeah.
But it just felt like a slow, hard descent, like pushing through earth that hasn't been broken, like hard earth that hasn't been broken yet. Like very different than what my last birth felt like, which felt more like a sliding through, This was more like excavating. I just now thought of that, excavating. And at one point my midwife did say from the corner, you might want to try, because I kept being on my hands and knees. She's like, maybe you try flipping over and leaning back. I was like, I don't want to, but I did, and it was awful. But that contraction really did a lot, and I think I screamed through it. And I also remember looking up in the middle of it, and the birth affirmation that happened to be hanging right above my head said, I can do hard things. So it's like, okay, yeah, okay. I'm almost done. So even pushing his head out felt like he had the biggest head on the planet. Like it just was like the slowest emergence of a head. And I was like, is it all the way out yet? I was like yelling at people. I was like, is it? Like, somebody tell me. My husband wasn't even looking because he was like too nervous. So maybe he was like, you still have to get the chin out. I was like, oh my gosh. Okay. And then it was finally out. And then there was a pause. And it was not a comfortable pause. It was very much a stretching pause. And then in the next contraction, I could feel him restitute. Like I could feel him turn very clearly towards my thigh. And she's like, I think you might have big shoulders. You're probably gonna have to push hard. So I gave it my all. And it felt like literally nothing moved. Like it was not a productive push between fur and my own effort. It was like a complete lack of movement. And I was already on my hands and knees. So it wasn't one of those things where I was like laying on my back, like with a small pelvic diameter, like, because Because, with stuck shoulders, usually the first thing you would do is get a woman on her hands and knees. So I was already there, and it was already still not working. And I think I said something out loud about it doesn't feel like anything happened. And she said, "Can I check for a cord?" And I was like, "Yes, please." So she did. She's like, "No cord. Do you want me to check his shoulders?" And I was like, "Yes." And she said, "Yeah, they're a little stuck." And I don't remember this clearly, and I do have a video. I should watch it, but I think she asked if I wanted her to try to loosen them, and I think I said yes. Like, I feel like there was a moment of consent there, like explicitly, but there might not have been. Whatever the case, she did not have to do the full like reach a finger in, hook an arm, and pull it down maneuver. She just did kind of like tilt the baby's head towards my belly and then towards my back, so it would kind of like create a slope between head and shoulder, and they released pretty quickly. And then he shot out into her.
She didn't even like rotate or anything
Because he'd already rotated. So it was just, she described it to me later that she was just creating a slope so that there wasn't as much of a hook. Kind of, I don't know, it's hard to explain that verbally.
No, that makes sense.
And because her hands were there, he shot into her hands, which that is a little disappointing because I had really, really desired to have like this still quiet moment of like quietly pulling my baby through the water slowly while looking at him and like slowly pulling him up above the surface. Like that kind of birth pause moment I really wanted. But in that moment, I was just too agitated to even be present to it. And so I just turned around and like took him from her right away, and which was not a struggle.
Right.
And pulled him up to my chest. And
so you still did get to take him from her and bring him up.
For sure. Yeah. Because I like immediately spun around and grabbed him from her and pulled him up, and she like backed right off again, like no hands, no rubbing him, no nothing. Yeah. She just stepped back, like physically stepped back, and watched. And I was watching him too. And again, if people know my previous story, my last baby didn't have a great APGAR score when she was born and just needed a fair amount of stimulation and a couple breaths. So I was like, there was a nervousness of like that happening again, but I could see with him right away, like he had great tone and he was sputtering and making faces and all these reassuring things that she had not done. And even though he was a little bluish, it never felt concerning to me. I think I did. He was gurgly, so I suctioned him with my mouth a tiny bit. But just mostly just gave him time and, held him and rubbed him and talked to him. And I think I cried a bit. I was just so relieved. And so happy. So relieved that it was over and that he was okay. Yeah. And Tim came over and kind of looked at us and got a little teary-eyed too. I think again with relief. And yeah, so we sat there not long. Oh, then when I looked up, all of my kids were there. So the other two children had come in at some point. I'm not exactly sure when still, but I guess my 7-year-old had run downstairs to tell the 9-year-old and the 2-year-old that the baby was coming. And so they had come up. So it was really fun to look up and see my entire family lining the edge of the pool.
Yeah.
And just moved closer to them and let them see him and touch him. But then it was cold, so I wanted to get out. I was worried that he would get too cold.
Yeah. It's definitely not comfortable to sit in cold water either.
No. Nope. Especially not with a long sleeve t-shirt on.
No.
Anyway. So they helped me get out and come to bed. He latched at the 20-minute mark, like so quick and easy. And I felt the placental separation gush pretty shortly after that. And again, backstory here is I have never had a placenta come out before the 2-hour mark. I don't bleed heavily, but it just, for some reason, always has taken about that long. But I had some herbs on hand this time to use, and I was like, I'm hopeful. This is going to be the time that it doesn't take 2 hours. And again, I was pretty patient with it at first, but we weren't cutting the cord because we wanted to do cord burning. That was really important to me. So I was like trying to hold the baby, nurse the baby, and deliver my placenta all at the same time, which is actually quite a lot to manage, as you might imagine, if you haven't tried it yourself. So I was giving it my all. Like, I think I worked harder on it this time than usual. I don't get after pains. That's my other weird fluky thing. Most women will feel some after pains that help them know like when to push, like, and I don't get that. So it's like, my midwife was like feeling my uterus and being like, you're having a contraction. Do you feel that? And I'm like, no. So yeah. So we tried all the things, Lauren. We tried the herbs I had. We tried sitting on the toilet. We tried me laying flat on my back with my hips tilted up to the ceiling. We tried ice water, which she had heard sometimes helps. We tried gentle cord traction. I tried coughing, growling, flat out pushing. It felt like we exhausted our toolbox and still wasn't coming out. Yeah. Now, I was not bleeding heavily, so it still wasn't an emergency by any stretch of the imagination, really. But again, agitated. I was so agitated. It was like, this thing has to get out of me. Like, I just need this thing to come out of me.
So psychologically, you needed it.
Yes.
Even though not physiologically.
Yeah. Which is true for her helping with the shoulders too. Like, and I said this to her yesterday when she visited. I was like, I'm fully aware that you helping me with the shoulders and the placenta were not medically necessary, but psychologically they felt very necessary. And I guess like that was an interesting lesson for me, because I think in general I can be such a purist. Like, if it's not medically necessary, never do it. Right. But I think just learning that there's something to be said for honoring where somebody is emotionally and psychologically, that has to matter too. And that's okay for that to have some sway in the decisions we make.
Yeah, they absolutely matter just as much.
Yeah. So
they're part of the health picture.
Mm-hmm. So she, at one point, after about 2.5 hours, so I'd now surpassed my longest placenta delivery time. It still wasn't budging. She's like, I can tell it has detached. It is not attached. It's mostly in your birth canal. The cord has gotten longer. It just won't come out. She said, I could reach in and pull it out. And the tone of her voice was like, I don't really want to, but I could. And I said, she said, but it wouldn't feel good. Duh. And I said, well, your hand isn't any bigger than his head. Let's do it. It's like, who am I? Like, So I laid down in bed on my back, and she told me to, like, let my legs part and keep my bottom loose, and here we go. And it was awful, like awful. And it took 2 attempts. She had to reach in and try to grab it, and oh my gosh, you think the hand's smaller than the head, so it's a big deal, but it's not meant to go up in that direction. Right. Yeah. Especially not right after birth, and especially not when the fist is then like opening to try to grab something and extract it. It was I screamed, and nobody else was in the room, and I think I kicked her in the crotch on accident. And I was like, "Laura, I don't like this." Anyway, she did get it out and accidentally punched a hole through it with her thumb in the attempt to grab it. And it was a huge relief. And she said, yeah, only a part of it was in your uterus. It was mostly in your birth canal. It was just wedged. And
interesting.
Her theory,
makes me wonder if like the shape of your pelvis or something is always kind of kept, like you just have a deep shelf there.
Uterine shelf is what she was proposing. So I don't really know, and I might not ever know, but it was out, and that was a relief. So he was born at 9:49 a.m., and then the placenta was born at 12:30 something, I think. So it took up a lot of time. And then we were able to call the kids back in, and we put the placenta in this special wooden heart-shaped bowl that I had spent months trying to find. For some reason, I had it in my head that I have to have this wooden bowl for my placenta. And the cord burning was sweet. I just love them for the way it quiets the room, and just any of the chaos that's happened before, just kind of everything just slows down, and we just have to be really present because it takes time.
It's just such an intentional time.
Yeah. And the kids each got a turn holding the candles, which is great because they're pyromaniacs. And Tim prayed for the baby. Just kind of blessed him. And we thanked the placenta for doing its job. And I really wanted to do like a name blessing, like reading something over him about his name and why we chose it, but we didn't have a name yet. So that didn't end up happening, which made the cord burning time feel a little awkwardly long. And again, I got agitated and was like, maybe we should just stop and cut it. And my eldest was like, nope, we're never going to quit. We're going to finish this up. I was like, okay, you say so.
Sounds like Hazel.
Yeah, absolutely.
Sorry, threw me out there.
It's okay. So we finished it up. And then we did trim it because I don't personally like the very long tail with the charred end. So we did trim it with like a little rubber band kind of thing. And by then it was about 1:30, I think. So he'd been born at 9:49. Placenta came 12:30-ish, somewhere in there. And then like 1:30-ish, I think, is when we finished up everything. Oh, and then we did the newborn exam, really brief kind of version of it. And the midwife had said that he looked really big, and everyone was guessing his weight and guessing in like the upper 9s and low 10s. And I was like, no way. Like, there's no way. My biggest baby up until this point has been 9 pounds, 10 ounces, and was my second born. And so anyway, Tim had to hold the scale because it was really heavy and my midwife wasn't tall enough to hold it high enough over the bed. So Tim was holding the scale. And she was reading it, and when she read it out, I was just like, are you kidding me? He was 10 pounds, 9 ounces. So like 2 pounds bigger than my last baby. And so that might explain some of why it felt more like excavating to get through the pelvis this time.
It was excavating some things.
Yes. And his head was like 14 3/4 inches or something. So it was like a pretty big noggin. So it was kind of one of those moments of like, wow, I'm glad I didn't know that ahead of time. Like, and also like, whew, that's impressive. I pushed that baby out, you know? Yeah, and yeah, so we just got tucked into bed, and I had my celebratory blueberry juice that I had bought for myself, and like some toast and eggs, and it was still like only the middle of the day. So we just had kind of a lazy afternoon as a family after the midwife and photographer left, and my kids baked a cake. We sang happy birthday to him, and ate the cake. It was really good. Yeah, I think that's kind of the end of the story. Yeah.
So, it throughout this, I know, and we didn't dive too deep into like the flow. I think you got to share a little bit there. In the that had been a theme. So you have this like the flow theme and then the agitation theme. Like, what's your biggest takeaway from that? This side of the birth story.
I think I'm going to be unpacking it for a while, but I forgot to say this. As my midwife was leaving, she hugged me, and I didn't premeditate saying this, but the words that came out of my mouth to her were, "I ended up needing you a lot more than I thought I would."
We've lost you.
And it made me like teary as I was saying it to her. And even now it makes me teary. And I think that is because my last birth was unassisted, like entirely. And I loved it and had a lot of pride in that, and having done it on my own and taking full responsibility and not needing anyone. But during my pregnancy with this babe, the Lord kept, like, partly through you, Lauren, but also partly through other people in my life, kind of agitating the word midwife in my brain. Like, what does it mean really to be a midwife? And am I called to be that? Am I already that? People were calling me that suddenly, even though I have gone through great lengths to not call myself that. So it seems like the Lord was just bringing some things up around that at a time that seemed a little bit strange, because my primary work at the time was, of course, just to grow and birth a baby. And so that theme had been coming up during my pregnancy with him. And then I was very reluctant to receive a midwife into my space because I had started building this identity around being a free birther and abandoning the idea that I was going to be a midwife ever, and just calling myself a birth keeper. And it just had kind of distanced myself in many ways from midwife for various reasons, but then having the Lord kind of like tease that during the pregnancy, and then through my husband's deep need for it, inviting a midwife into my space reluctantly, and then to end up surprising myself by calling out for her hands twice, like with two kind of big things that technically I probably could have resolved myself given a little more time, but it felt good to be able to reach out and have her step in and assist me in those ways at the time. And so it just feels like it's I don't know, like, again, I'm going to be unpacking this for a long time, but just like as a mother and as a birth attendant, who am I and who am I not? What do I really believe about this? Like, there's just a lot there for me. And I feel like it's all purposeful, and I don't feel like in a rush to kind of sort that all out, but I can see that the Lord is doing something. And I had sensed from the Father during this pregnancy too, that the midwife being hired was largely for my husband's peace of mind, but also because he wanted to teach me some things about receiving and being cared for. And because that's not something that comes very naturally to me. And so I think obviously I ended up allowing and asking for that during this birth with her. And she did it really beautifully. Like, it was just right. And then even she came back the next day, and then she knows I don't need a lot. Like, I'm not a very needy client. So she wasn't sure she was going to come back again. And then I texted her a few days ago and I said, can you actually come back again and do another postpartum visit for us? It would just feel good to me to be checked in on. And so I asked for that again.
Yeah.
And she came yesterday, and we had a great visit and processed the birth a little bit. And she held my baby and cooed over him and gave me a big hug, and just felt like the nurturance and just being open to that. And so I think there's lessons there for me too about asking for and receiving nurturance.
It's beautiful.
Yeah.
It's beautiful.
And then the agitation thing kind of annoys me that I'm so agitated. Like, I would rather see myself as a serene, in command birther. But that's just not what it was this time. And I'm trying to just keep a sense of humor about that. And then actually someone in my Embrace Birth Journey program pointed out to me that this is going to get really kind of out there, but his middle name is Ignatius, which means fire, flame.
Yeah.
And she said, you know what? Agitation is required to start a fire.
Yeah.
And I was like, ooh, boom. Like,
right.
Yes, it is. So almost wondering if there's some sort of like prophetic significance about his life in the presence of the agitation in his birth too. So maybe that's a little too out there, but
I don't think so at all. I think, especially with how the depth of which, the symbolicness of his name and the, just the significance that honestly the Lord puts upon names, but that you agree in that, right? Like, and I just think it's such a beautiful thing that even though it's not, quote, what we want, it's further than that, right? It's deeper than that, if it's part of who he is, it's that it's his birth story, really, right? And it's part of his story and what he needed to really be who he is and all that he's going to be. So, yeah. I think you have such an array of beautiful birth stories too. That, I think this one's a beautiful birth story.
Yeah, it is in its own way. Yep.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I guess that's really, is there anything else that you would want? There's some really awesome takeaways. It's important to me that I was 3 hours and 33 minutes away when I gave birth to that baby.
Because your camper had some issues.
The camper broke down and we couldn't move forward. And so that's where we were. And so I thought that was entertaining. That it was like, so her water broke at 2 hours and then an hour and 33 minutes road time later.
That's so crazy. You did not make it far.
I did not make it very far at all. But I thought that was entertaining. There were so many Hebraic numbers that were coming up in the preemptive time of this this birth, and all of the words kept pointing to different scriptures and Hebraic words, and then it was like, look, there's. I think we had been on the 222. I don't remember. Was it Joel? I don't know. We were in some scriptures with 222, and then I'm 3 minutes or 3 hours and 33 minutes away, and I was like, that's just hilarious.
Yep. Yeah, playing with numbers this time was fun with you. I'd never really gotten into that before, but even like when this time of birth, and you helped me find like the Greek and Hebrew like Strong's Concordance numbers for 949, and that ended up really shaping our choice of his name. And
there's so much there that the Lord kept showing. Fun. It was just really entertaining. Yeah,
really fun.
It's good stuff.
I wanted to point out, like we've talked about this in the Surpassing Pain-Free Birth episode, that your birth doesn't have to be pain-free in order to be anointed. Like they're not the same thing, right? And it was cool to be able to experience that in a weird way. Like that this was not a serene, pain-free birth, but it was still an anointed birth. And because my last several births were basically pain-free, I hadn't gotten to put that theory to the test in a sense, and this time I got to see that in action in my own story. And the little ways the Lord showed me that he saw me and was giving me the desires of my heart, even though there was other ways that it was really hard.
Right.
Like even not having the baby until it was daylight, and all my kids being there, and I'm forgetting the other examples I had in my mind, but
October birth.
Yes, that was another one. I really wanted him to be born in October.
But not on the 31st.
Yep. He came on the 29th. So yeah. And also that it wasn't a hands-off birth.
Right.
But it was really cool to see how hands-on doesn't have to be invasive or feel violating.
Right.
When it's done well, right?
Yeah. Like when it's done with your choice and your consent, and it's,
and at my
because
request.
you're wanting that, your request, right? That's the word I was looking for, right? Like you're requesting that, and then that's very much autonomy. Like it's very much autonomy.
Yep. And I just have so much appreciation for my midwife for being able to hold that space with me, because I started off saying, like, just basically don't touch me and leave me alone, Right. And she was fully prepared to do that and was doing that until I said, I actually do want you, And it, again, gives me thought about, like, if I were to function in that role in the future, like, what it looks like to do that well with women, and to find that balance between, like, what does it mean to really give a woman her autonomy? And that doesn't necessarily mean you never touch or never do anything, but like the doing comes at request and with consent and mutual understanding and respect.
It seems like that was a theme even in your own birth attendance in your pregnancy. I remember that one particular conversation about I think you were tending virtually to someone, and you were like, I think that if she just switched in position, but I don't want to like tell her what to do. And you were in the Telegram chat with me, and I was like, don't deprive her of your wisdom. She's invited you here. And so like, you can offer that. And I don't know, I just keep seeing that theme, right? Like you were finding I think it happened again with the, like, should I go in time to be there or not? That, it's just that, like, what is the line of as attending birth? What's the role? And how needed? I always say midwifery, whether you're, birth keeper in the spirit of midwifery, if you're tending in this spirit of being with women, it's like the most like unneeded and yet so very needed role, right? Like we're so not needed, but yet we are so very needed. And the juxtaposition of that is very, they seem like it's complete opposites, but a good midwife holds both of those.
Yeah, well said. Yep, that definitely did come up in me as a birth attendant during the pregnancy.
Like that's the agitation.
Ooh, yeah. Yes, the agitation of living in the tension between two
seemingly
extremes,
contradictory
really.
ideas.
Yeah. Both as a woman who was giving birth and as a birth attendant. Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
So,
that's what I say. The revelation lives in between two contradictory ideas.
Yeah.
Two seemingly contradictory ideas.
Yes. Well, it was the birth I needed. And
Yeah.
I know that, as in most birth stories, over time, more and more of the reasons for and the gifts from the way a birth unfolds become revealed, you know?
Yeah.
And I'm only 11 days out, so I know there'll be more coming in terms of reflections and revelations.
Yes, absolutely. Well, if there's any good ones, maybe we'll jump in and do a little bonus episode with them.
There you go. Deep thoughts from birth revelations or something.
Yes.
Well, thanks for helping me record this. I think that having the back and forth with you is helpful for pulling out more details. Yeah,
it was a fun one to listen to, and an honor to have a little bit of a piece of role in the pregnancy and in the, just the retelling of it. So
yeah, absolutely.
All right. Well, I'll see you next time, friend.
All right. Thank you so much for tuning in to this week's episode of Holy Wild Birth. We hope that you were genuinely encouraged, inspired, and challenged by what you heard today. If you're loving what you hear, please make sure that you share it. Leave reviews. That helps other mamas find this content as well. And don't forget to read the show notes, okay? Because that's where you can find our email address if you want to reach out to us and start a conversation. It's also where you'll find free offerings as well as invitations to work with me and or Lauren. We can't wait to get to know you. See you next week.